studied by paleontologists in Canada and University of Texas, published in the National Geographic magazine as the great intermediate, a dinosaur that could fly. And about 5 days later, a number of paleontologists looked at it and said, "You guys, couldn't you tell that this tail wasn't properly attached to the body here?" Type of thing. Tail of a dinosaur. And they went back to China, where the thing originally came from, and they found the rest of the body of the dinosaur that belonged associated with this tail. And they found that other birds like this had an entirely different kind of tail. This is, you know, because the paradigm of evolution is so strong in science, this is the kind of evidence that's sometimes picked up, and, you know, it gets out there. Millions of copies of this out there. National Geographic, when they publish this type of thing. Fashions in science. Sure that birds evolved from dinosaurs. And the battle still goes on, you know. And there's some evolutionists who totally disagree with it, and some totally agree with it, type of thing. But it's, you know, anything that's dinosaur, that tends to win out on TV and textbooks and everywhere else. At present, because dinosaurs are so popular. Well, can scientists ignore the scientific evidence for God? Well, sure they can, because they've done it so many times. And I give several examples. I told you about Semmelweis, when people ignored his data, and so many mothers died. Mendel, his ideas of heredity were ignored for some 40 years. Wegener, probably 30, 40 years. His ideas of the continents move were ignored. Brett's interpretation of a catastrophic flood here in the Northwest, again ignored for some 30, 40 years, 1923 to 1960, anyway, 1962, and so on. Science doesn't follow data, folks. It's whatever idea happens to be dominant that tends to dictate what is accepted and what is published. Why do scientists ignore the evidence for God? And I'm going to close with this section here. It's a real puzzle, you know, and I'm trying to get at it by several suggestions here, because we got all this data that, you know, you can't answer the original life, you can't answer fossil record and all this stuff. Why is it that the scientific community is not open to this idea? And I make a few suggestions in the book. One reason is that the study of facts and explanations about nature is what a scientist does. And you say, no, I'm not going to worry about God because I'm going to study matter, type of thing. This doesn't hold up very well. Why? Scientists are willing to speculate about all kinds of things, folks. They'll talk about universes. They talk about these multiverses, these thousands, millions of other universes, which there's no evidence. They talk about organisms existing 200 million years before you can find them in the fossil record, because, you know, evolution will take a lot of time. Science really indulges in all kinds of speculation, but boy, don't you dare talk about God. There's something radically wrong here. Something radically wrong. And the scientists wanting to stay by nature is limiting himself to a practice that he freely indulges in other areas as long as it's not God. Well, Polanyi said, well, the reason science is in this situation, I think he's right. It's an overreaction to the restrictions of the medieval time. Science rebelled against authority, the church, and so on. They went into a mechanistic, materialistic philosophy type of thing, and that's where they are at present. Another reason is that scientists feel that, boy, if you give up science, you're giving up rationality. And to a certain extent, you might think about that. But There's a strong thesis out there that science developed in the Western world, and I'm talking about scholars like Collingwood, Whitehead, philosopher at Harvard, and so on. They say science developed in the Western world because of the rational God of the Bible. This shocks you. I see from some of the expressions on your faces. And now science rejects the very thing that was the basis for science developing in the Western world, type of thing. So this is probably not a very good. The fear of giving up rationality is probably more superficial than it's for real. Then, other scientists are afraid of a religious fundamentalist type takeover of society, and they really fear this. Oh, if these conservatives get hold of everything, we're going to have a ruined society. Well, society is not going so well right now, in case you're wondering. Pride in science, there's no question about that. Very strong factor. Science is superior to everything else. But keep in mind, power tends to corrupt, natural power correct. Absolutely. And science has been successful. It has a certain reason to be proud. But there is no reason why science should exclude God. Personal ego and desire of freedom, no question that's a factor. Gould, Huxley, and so on, talk about the maximum freedom and so on they had when they gave up the idea that there was a meaningful universe. But probably the most strongest factor, number 7 here, it's the present fashion in science now. If you want to be a scientist, you've got to leave God out of your scientific interpretation. And you try and put them in there, you won't get published. And furthermore, you may lose your job, as some have. In some places because they dared mention God in their publications, type of thing. So it's a very strong factor. It is not a rational factor, but it's it's the way community behaves and so on. So in concluding, I just mentioned this. Science excludes God mainly because of personal and socialized factors, not because of the scientific data. And just in finishing here, science is in trouble. It now excludes God by definition. Science indulges in a lot of speculation, but is inconsistent when it will not even consider speculating about God. Furthermore, the consistent God of the Bible, the God of cause and effect, fits nicely with the cause and effect science has discovered in the universe. There isn't all that much difference between the rationality of God and the rationality of science. The Bible is a logical book. So is science, of course. There's not that much difference in the two. There's a lot of scientific data that is very hard to explain unless there is a perceptive, intelligent designer. God is essential to explain the necessary precision and complexity we find in nature. Science needs to return to the intellectual openness pioneers of modern science had and included God in its explanatory menu. And it's my hope that you'll keep your faith in God, folks. There's plenty of scientific evidence for it. It's not a matter of just blindly deciding it. Go to science. We are going to find strong evidence for God. And if there is a God, you'd expect that God to communicate to us. If He created us. And, we can't explain it without God. All these figures I gave you, you can't explain that. There's got to be a God. And if there is a God, He would communicate with us. And you go all the figures right. The Bible is that communication, no question. Makes the most accepted by a third of the world, as their moral guide and so on, for Christianity and so on. So God bless you and keep your faith in the Bible. Thank you very much.